Hello, y'all. It's Jessica. Hello. Today we're going to discuss books and sex in young adult lit. Now, before you get all uncomfy around the topic of sex, you should know it can be an umbrella term for important themes in young adult literature. Some of these themes in books include sexuality or anything LGBT related, romance in general, sexual abuse, including talk of rape and the topic of consent, as well as discussion of puberty. Any of these topics can be labeled as something so vague as sexual theme, but these themes can be very educational to read about as well as just be relatable to a young adult audience. There are many books in young adult literature that can have these themes, but because sexual themes are taboo subjects to talk about, it can be banned from different schools or libraries, preventing readers from reading them. This is known as censorship, as these private facilities are restricting an audience from receiving content that they may be interested in. Some of these books that are challenged are even classic pieces of literature. For example, let's look at The Scarlet Letter. The book was written in 1850, set in the Puritan time period. This book is about a young girl who conceives a baby from an affair. Because of her sin, she is forced to wear a scarlet letter around her, that being the letter A, letting everyone know she has committed adultery. All of this equaled up to be a big scandal for the time and can be an uncomfortable issue even today. At the time when it was published, it was sold out within 10 days. This was mainly due to it being controversial, piquing people's interest. Now let's look at today. Some schools encourage reading The Scarlet Letter as it is a work of art that captures life at the time, and we can learn about a lot about society's stance on sin as well as it against women. Some schools around America have argued that the book is obscene and its morals and promotes the act of adulteries and stuff, but in that it just has bad morals in general. That's where I was getting at. But to that, I personally think they haven't read the book, as I don't want to give the whole story away if you haven't read it. But let's just say there is no actual sex scene in the book, as it focuses on life after the child is born. The point is more of the consequence of living with sin in a judgmental community, but that's just my opinion. The point is, some schools censor books for sexual content without even reading and understanding it. Although classic literature can be challenged, more and more books that were written in the past 50 years are being banned. I actually have my own story on that, as I got suspended in 7th grade for reading and bringing a banned book to school. That book was The Walking Dead. Okay, so for those who don't know, the show The Walking Dead was based on the comics that were first published in 2003. Their issues came out monthly but gained popularity due to the TV show premiering in 2010. I have the graphic novels, which were basically all the comics that were set up in huge volumes. I really found the story line captivating, as the show's survival storyline was unique to me. I was a fan of the show, but I didn't care for all the gore in it. I liked the books much more, as they weren't going for a scare factor all the time, and I found it contained more character development. And yes, the comics were just as graphic as the show sometimes, involving violent, disturbing pictures, but you can just cover them up. Bad language that all middle schoolers have heard, let's be real. And of course, some sexual content, although once again, there is no actual sex in it, but we'll get to that. Anyways, 7th grade me didn't think much of it being labeled as mature content, though, as I knew it was a good story and everyone knew about it from the show and watched it. So, therefore, I brought it to school to read one day, thinking nothing of it. So, what happened was I was reading quietly at my desk when the dean came in. I didn't notice she was eyeing my book, and even worse, didn't notice what picture was on the next page. In my defense, that was literally the worst page in my book, and she just so happened to see it before I could close it. You can clearly see what she saw and why she confiscated it to look more into this book and why it shouldn't be allowed to school. Like I said, that was the worst page that showed sexual content, but somehow she managed to go through the whole book and bookmark every page that was a sin. You can imagine that there was a bookmark on almost every other page with that. She showed it to our principal, who agreed the book should be banned from the school, and agreed with my dean that a suspension was fair for me since the book contained, I quote, pornography. What? I was really confused, as the book never contained porn, and besides that one page, there's no sex act being seen or even really talked about. I asked to reconsider because of that, and instead I was shown the page I got in trouble for, another page that discussed rape, and finally an illustration on one page where a female character was in her bra as she was getting dressed. Once again, excuse me, all those things aren't porn. A woman in a freaking bra isn't porn, yet there I was being suspended for bringing pornography to school. You can also imagine the confusion from my parents who didn't mind me reading the book or watching the show. The school must have thought them allowing me to consume this content was like corrupting my brain or something, because God forbid, me seeing a woman in a bra is going to make me a porn addict. Anyways, that's enough Walking Dead. I will say, in their defense, it was a private Catholic middle school where they can and did punish any behavior with very little reasoning, but they have the right to, as they are a private institution. However, this led me to wonder if censorship was just as bad in public communities, and the answer is yes, it can be. Looking at public high schools in conservative regions leads to a lot of censorship, as they think some books go against their community guidelines. A big one is queer literature. Now that it's 2020, they won't straight up say we're banning it because it's gay. Instead, they will find other reasons. LGBT graphic novels, usually banned for lewd illustrations. Others you may have guessed just get labeled as inappropriate for sexual content. Once again, sex doesn't even have to be in the book to be labeled as sexual, because the topic of same-sex attraction is too mature for high schoolers to read. The fact is, more than half the books that are banned are LGBT-related books. Reflecting on why this is hard, as if it's obvious that these books were heterosexual romance stories. Nothing would be wrong with them, you know? But however, some communities just label the homosexual content as being too out of line and risky, when the sad reality is they're just homophobes who feel displaying the books will promote the gay agenda. How tragic. LGBT books were banned in every school I've been in. Once again, private Catholic schools. I didn't even know that they existed until my sophomore year. I find them really fascinating to read now, though, as it deals with so much more than just same-sex attraction, like society, acceptance, coming out, heartbreak. These topics are so important and can help someone who's queer tremendously. All right, the last book I would like to discuss. Excuse me. It's called Speak. Speak was published in 1999 and was one of the top banned books from 2000 to 2009. The reasoning it was labeled as explicit sexual content. One professor from Missouri State University went as far as to say Speak is a filthy soft pornography. What Speak actually is a story about a freshman girl who was raped and goes through a journey of how to cope with it, as well as touching on the importance of silence touching on the importance of silence and how it doesn't mean consent. So sorry. The statement from that professor was made in 2010, and I hope within the past decade he sees that the topic of rape should never be dismissed the way he did. I mean, Me Too movement, I don't need to say more. But this is why we're discussing this. This is why all this matters in the first place. Like you may be thinking, what's the big deal about these books being censored? Well, my dad always told me someone who reads is someone who thinks. Those who censor know books have a great power to inspire an audience and have them relate to something they may be going through. Taking these books away leaves them without knowledge and can result in loneliness as well as ignorance. Going back to our previous examples, LGBT books are powerful as it can help someone who is questioning their sexuality questioning their sexuality feel validated. It's just as important for someone who knows nothing about the LGBT community to read LGBT-related books. That way they can be educated and end misconceptions about sexuality. It is just as important for books like Speak, as that book has the power to warn young girls about consent and that they have control over their body. It could also help those who have been abused see that they are not alone and that they do have a voice. These books have the power to change lives, and banning them is taking that possibility away. Some would argue that these books should be banned because sex and its umbrella terms are awkward to talk about. So let's just ignore it. Are you kidding me? That may have been acceptable when the Scarlet Letter came out 170 years ago, but it's 2020. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about the umbrella terms. Let's talk about the real reason these books are banned. Fear and ignorance is all censorship will do. Discussion can help us grow. Well, thanks for listening to me ramble. Didn't know I would be this upset by censorship. But really, I highly recommend reading banned books to see why they are controversial in the first place, because you should always remember a banned book is not always a bad book. All right, see y'all later. Bye.